Greetings, everybody. We are now live. Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining us for Mindset Live on this Monday night. We're glad to be back on the air, and we're glad to have everyone joining us. I'm Gareth Davies, and once again, I am joined by, let me introduce the rest of the crew. Let's go over to Steve Genier, from the creator and host of Nocturnal Frequency Radio. Hey, Steve.
Hey, I can't see myself. Am I there? Can you see me? Okay. Hi, Gareth. How are you?
I can. Don't play tricks on me, man. I can see you. We can all see you. Okay. This
great to be here. Great to be here.
Awesome to be here. Also, we have the other co-host of the Nocturnal Frequency Radio Show, Mr. Alex Rondini. What's up, Alex?
Not much. Good evening, everyone.
So, Alex, are you finished cleaning your desk?
No, I'm trying to do it as discreetly as possible.
Alex,
for the listeners there, for the viewers, I spilled beer all over my desk.
Oh, no. Yeah,
Party foul.
So now his desk has the odor of beer, and I was like, well, you say that like it's a bad thing. And last but not least...
It's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just it makes me want to drink more.
There you go.
Or it's Miller Lite. That's bad. I don't want to smell Miller Lite.
the other,
at least it's not burrito sauce.
The other voice that you're hearing there is, of course, the one and only Mr. Justin Villarreal. Hey, Justin, how you doing, man?
Doing all right. Evening, everyone out there in YouTube and Radioland.
YouTube and Radioland. I like that. So this week, the topic of discussion on Mindset Live, I know in the last few weeks we've talked about the afterlife, the major afterlife discussion. Where do we go after we die? This week we're going to change gears a little bit. Just a little bit. Not too much. But we're going to talk about demons and demonology. The dark side of, I guess spirituality, right? So I guess, what would a demon be? I mean, top of my head, I would say that it would be a non-human, negative, malignant entity that exists sometimes in our reality, most of the time not, but takes enormous pleasure in tormenting humans. Let's go to Justin first. I want to pick Justin's brains on this one first. So,
they're falling out already.
Demons. What's your take on demons? From the way I just described them, Justin, does that ring true to you, or would you add or subtract from that description I gave?
Yeah, I would. The only thing I would add is that demons are not necessarily confined to negative perceptions. Demons, in some cases, rather before Christian influences, they were kind of helpful. I mean, when you think about it, and what most people use, or I shouldn't even say use, apply summoning demons in this sense, is usually to help them in something. They conjure them up. Conjuring would be the better term to it. They conjure them up to achieve some kind of goal. It's not necessarily something that they're doing, or in some sense that they go and willingly come to you, in a sense, through the conjuring or other other interferences. You kind of open yourself up, allow to those things. So really, that would be the only addition to that the majority of our negative perceptions on demons really comes from our Catholic Christian perceptions. And if you follow anything farther back, you'll look at jinns and all sorts of explanations for demons, which are not, demon is just the common term too. If I remember correctly, the demon terminology origins is Greek. And I believe it meant like helper spirit.
Well,
I forget the term.
It was like a motivation, like a spirit. Yeah. In other words, it was another word for soul. In other words, we would all have our demon or our daemon, and in some ways that's spilled over into the computer world now, right? It's like the central core,
like an avatar.
The central core of an operating system is called the daemon, because it controls all other things.
That is totally right.
It's interesting you mentioned about the some of the negative connotations of demons.
Yes.
That they originally started out as more of like a helper ghost, maybe not ghost, helper spirit of some kind that mankind would summon, and have
Yes.
the demon do its bidding to have them
Essentially,
obey. Would that be correct?
yeah, to a certain extent. I mean, we see it in more so in other cultures where demons kind of take on more of an elemental force. If I think that's a better way to explain it. So in that context, demons are essentially part of like a collective energy of an area or a building, even, or even in some aspects, emotional state of minds. Even in a lot of descriptions of demons, we tend to have them specifically do different things. One for depression, one for stealing. Even in our Catholic Christian, there's a demon for everything. So it's still carried over into that sense to demons were around for specific things, or they were connected to specific things, and in some cases actual dolls or even people, if you want to take it to that extent. But most likely it's like a piece of land or an area or even a body of water could have a demon in a sense.
So we would kind of explain it in regard to aspects of our personality or the environment around us. How we'd add
most definitely
the word demon as if there was some kind of spirit or element that was controlling, like the wind. We'd have a spirit of the wind, and if the wind was particularly severe, like a tornado, it would be a demon. A demon of the wind would come and destroy our crops or our village or whatever the case may be. So let me jump over to Steve. Steve, does this ring true to you? Does this kind of vibe with what your perceptions of what a demon may or may not be?
Well, I agree to a certain point. I mean, paganistic views do have that demon for every element, if you will, and in other cultures like the Japanese culture, having their yokai system, where they have like a demon sort of creature for pretty much every element. But when it comes to Catholicism and Christianity, if you will, there's an actual structure. A fallen angel structure, much like Lucifer, obviously being the head of that. There are several demons that have been listed over the years, and of course, don't say their name. You're in for a lot of trouble if you do that. But they've been there. The structure's been there, and of course. It's a thing of evil, if you will. To me, it's always been a control mechanism, if anything. But if I can be blunt, after all the research that I've done with demons and the demon structure, the fallen angel structure, and all that kind of stuff, and through personal experience with investigating the paranormal and all that, well, the cases of demon possession and all that kind of stuff, it's extremely rare. And I think a majority of what we consider today as a demon, if you will, or a possession, more or less demon, if you will, being human. If anything, we are demonic.
Let me shoot over to Alex, get his take on this. Alex, what's your take on demons? Does it ring true with anything that we've said so far, or would you like to add and expand on it?
Looks like Justin's ready to laugh at something I'm about to say. I was about to say Steve's demonic for sure, but it's one of those things. It's like Steve said. It was used more or less to control and basically explain away what we didn't understand. Much like the ancients prior to Christianity attributed different gods to different, like the harvest god or the sun god or the moon god or what have you. They basically played off on that and just said anything negative that happens in our lives, and we all know that negative stuff happens to us all the time, but in order to explain it away when people didn't know any better, they attributed it to deities that basically caused your ill will or ill fate for that matter, right? But it depends on the structure that you go on. Like, I mean, if you go on the Christian-based structure, then obviously there is that sort of tiered level sort of demonic, if you will, starting with the head being Satan, and then obviously moving down to all the other demons like Beelzebub. I've said it,
Yes.
so now I'm going to be haunted.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that's
But
that's one of
Yeah, no,
those
go on.
things, though, right? Like, you can't say the name, or
Apparently.
you have to when you do encounter something that you think might be demonic. You have to tell it or get it somehow to reveal itself and to speak its name.
Yeah.
And then once it
Right, and
says its name, you have
You have
power
power
over it. Once it truly reveals itself for what it really is.
Yeah, and that's what they do with exorcisms too. They try to get
Yeah.
the demon to say its name and to reveal its identity, so it can be cast out in the name of Jesus, right? Names seem to have a lot of weight, apparently, but again, that's one branch of belief, and I don't
Yeah.
think it follows with every single branch of belief, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's an interesting idea, though. That if you have to get the demon to reveal its name in order to have power over it, and demons are always negative, masters of deceit and deception, and you'd think that when they get into that corner and you're asking them their name, they might want to, I don't know, call me crazy, but lie,
Lie? Yeah.
right? I mean, why
Exactly.
why wouldn't they just like make some stuff up? Why would they have to?
Yeah.
Why would they be compelled to tell
and the
them
premise-
their real name?
Right, and the premise of these demons is deceit.
Yeah.
So why wouldn't they lie when it comes to telling people or telling whoever is there, the priest or what have you? Exactly like you said, why wouldn't they lie about who they are?
Right.
So they wouldn't have power over them.
Right.
Well, would it really be deceit when you think about it? If you know you're dealing with demons, and then let's say you willfully go about, you understand what a demon is, in at least the most Christian context that we have, you would know that they maybe deceive. And I wouldn't even say they deceive. I think more or less is like, it's like a sleight of hand, and it's a car salesman. Okay, they don't necessarily deceive. They just don't give you all the details, you know. And
Well,
the
that's
way
deception, isn't it?
I guess
It's not
I
not entirely, but I
He's
Yeah.
deceiving us right now.
I hear where
He's-
Justin's coming from. I kind of I get where he's coming from, though, as far as that, because like it would show you enough, but not enough.
Yeah.
There's that great scene. I know we're going to talk about The Exorcist, the movie, eventually. We have to. We have to go there.
Oh, yeah, it is.
But there's that wonderful scene in The Exorcist where Father Karras is talking to Reagan, who's possessed by the demon Pazuzu, and he's not convinced. He's not sure that there is a demon involved here. Maybe she's just mentally ill or sick or whatever. And he's trying to figure it out. And there's a great scene where he's in her room, and the drawer on her bedside cabinet just opens by itself. And Karras turns to Reagan / Pazuzu and says, "Did you do that?" And she's like, "Yeah, I did that." And he's like, "Well, do it again."
Yeah.
And it refuses to do it again because it'll show you enough so you'll be like, "Oh my gosh, what?" But it'll never do it enough where it'll confirm.
Does it have enough power
what's
to
really
do it
going
again,
on?
though?
Well, I don't know. I mean,
I need more power.
more power. So to add to that, I mean, demons, I guess, are getting very, very prevalent in certain supernatural television shows.
Of course.
Every paranormal show these days, the houses that are infested with demons are the ones that get the biggest ratings, I guess. Whether they are or are not infested with demons is kind of irrelevant. It definitely has a ratings grab. But the thing that really brought demons into popular culture, I guess, would be, of course, The Exorcist, the classic movie from 1974, I believe, which
That's a good year.
which really brought that into the forefront of the public's imagination.
I have to beg to differ. Sorry. I
Okay.
have to beg to differ. It was actually 1969 when I was born.
Okay, all right.
The cinephile
Okay,
here.
all right.
I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean,
I kind of threw you for a loop.
the Exorcist is something, I guess. I mean, it really, all of us on this show, I'm assuming, it turned us on
Of
to
course.
the idea of demons, of what they may or may
Yeah.
not be, or whether they even exist. I know the first time I saw The Exorcist, up until I saw it, I had no idea or even concept of what a demon was. No, didn't know anything about it whatsoever until after I saw that movie. So let's delve into the movie and try and separate the fact from the fiction in regard to this classic movie. For people watching right now, if you've never seen this movie, did you just arrive on Earth yesterday? Or I mean,
Yeah.
but if you haven't seen it, I would strongly recommend you go see it.
Yeah.
It's a horror movie that came out over 40 years ago, and it's still very, very unnerving and disturbing. It's very much a true horror movie. I would say it's probably in the top 10, or if not the top 5 of the greatest horror movies ever made. What it sets out to achieve, it achieves. Whether you're religious or not, it is still a very, very unnerving movie, and definitely something that I think that any student of film or the paranormal should absolutely watch. Let me go to Steve first, because Steve, like myself, is a movie/horror film aficionado, and I'm sure he has seen The Exorcist multiple times. But Steve, let me ask you, when you first saw that movie, tell us about the experience, and because you're into the paranormal, how did it change your view on the paranormal, if it did?
I don't know if it ever changed my view on the paranormal, because I think my view of the paranormal really didn't mature until probably after I'd seen the movie, much later. When I saw the movie, obviously for the very first time, it was definitely life-changing. There's no doubt about that. I mean, how can it not be? And I guess it wasn't until I was able to see the uncut version of the Exorcist that really, really, really ramped things up. The spider walk being included in there, and several little tidbits that had been cut out of the original feature when it ran for the very first time, which is shameful because I mean the movie in its entirety is just it's incredible.
Yeah.
I don't think you can't sit through that movie without chills.
Oh yeah,
to your bone.
Sure.
From beginning to end.
Yeah.
Well, what was
the imagery?
Oh, no question. What
the imagery alone? I mean, and to see Linda Blair, her character, what she was put through, it's just incredible. The endurance, and I remember reading an interview with her about it, and her going off and saying, what she had to go through to give you that sort of real life scenario that I'm possessed and I'm puking, and the things that she had to do. It's just like, wow.
Yeah.
Kudos to you for, surviving this role.
What was
she was young when she did that movie too.
She was.
Sorry?
She was.
She was very young to be able to portray such a character at that age is phenomenal.
That's what I mean. It's just incredible.
What was great about that movie, though, and I think what really propelled it into its legendary status, was that it took an ancient religious mythology and firmly placed it into modern day society.
Yes,
and it did it in such a way where it was not done for laughs. It wasn't done as a goof. They treated the subject very, very seriously. right? Even obviously, this is a movie. This is make believe. It's fantasy, but it was done in a way where this was it was taken very, very seriously, almost to the point of it being documentary. I mean, it's not.
Yeah.
It is not. It's,
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
I mean, let's be clear. It is not a documentary. It's a movie.
No.
But the tone, the tone of the film, is serious to the point where it could have been filmed in a documentary style and still worked. Would you not agree?
Absolutely. I mean, for crying out loud. I mean, if and I don't want to equate it or compare it to, say, like the Blair Witch, if you will,
Right.
and how that broke ground.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, The Exorcist, like you said, it's like watching something real life unfolding before your eyes for the very first time, seeing stuff. I mean, how many people had actually seen or witnessed or even knew what an exorcism was all
Exactly.
about?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, right there and then. And the fact that the Catholic Church was involved in this and heavily involved in it, and the fact that, look, there's priests doing this?
Mhm.
What the hell, man? This is insane.
Yes.
But the important thing here, though, to remember is, were they, and of course the movie, it's a movie,
Mhm.
based upon a case in Boston, a boy
Right,
actually in
right.
Boston,
Right.
that and loosely based upon that, obviously.
Right.
But you have to sit there and think, and you look at a lot of these well-known documented possession cases out there, and you sit there and go, do these priests actually think they were possessed, or they were mentally unstable? You have to look at the mechanics of the possession.
Yeah.
What
That-
these people were doing to cause these priests or whoever to think that they were possessed by a demon is a whole new can of worms that you need to
Right.
open up.
Yeah.
Well, that was the that was one of the main things in the movie. William Peter Blatty, the author of the original book, The Exorcist. It was a book before a movie, a best-selling book. So he was responsible with crafting the story and bringing this ancient religious ritual and mythology and placing it firmly into modern day society. But the reason he did that was that I think he was a student when he saw a newspaper article in the 1950s where a boy in the area where he was going to school.
I think it was earlier. I think it was in the 40s. Actually,
might have been the 40s, yeah, where
Yeah.
it was the boy was possessed, and the priest had to be called in to perform an exorcist to free the boy. And because Blatty was a devout Catholic, this kind of planted the seed in his brain, which grew over the years, where he would actually sit down and write the book, The Exorcist, and he turned the young boy into a young girl, which makes it a little more disturbing from my point of view, and brought that into literary and cinema history. It literally changed everything. And when you think about it, a movie that's what, 45 years old, about 45, 46 years old, and it's still as terrifying and disturbing now, 45 years later, as it was when it first came out. Well, why do you think that is? Let me go to Justin. Justin, why do you think a 45-year-old movie is still as disturbing now as it was when it came out?
I think it was overall just the directing of the movie, the cinematography, the sound. I think during that time, even all horror movies just had that feeling of realness, rawness to it, So it adds to the makeup effects and all the stage area. Well, I shouldn't even say stage, because it was still filmed in a condo and everything. So everything was filmed there where it was at. Going to the hospital, everything felt real. And in that, like you explained before, how they take it serious, you see what Reagan is going through throughout this whole movie. And if you follow the series, you see what happens throughout the whole series. It still kind of stays to those grounded roots to things. But the whole movie, she's going to doctors. Her mother's very distraught. Even, I believe, before they even get the church involved, they were very hesitant, and that's another thing to point out, is that when it comes to these things, the priests don't just jump. It goes through a whole probationary period, and they have to send out investigators themselves. And then to answer some question, they require that you seek some psychiatry help before you get involved with even dealing with an actual exorcism yourself. And of course it has to be approved, among other things. So, it's a very real scenario that they provided in that movie. Now, I saw the movie again when it was re-released with the new edits, and it was still scary, but I would have to say that some things were a bit funny, I think, given just certain context, and probably because 30-some years later, as I'm not, a kid anymore, it was just the way it was played off. But besides all that, I mean, I think even the theater laughed in some parts, but still, I was a little surprised. I was like, oh, well, I guess, we're in a new age.
Well,
I think it was like 1998.
Yeah, it was the late 90s. And I totally agree with you, Justin. Because I prefer the original theatrical cut of The Exorcist than the new version. Because even though the new version, when she's coming down the stairs and stuff, and a lot of other disturbing imagery that was cut out of the original, I think the original theatrical release just plays.
It grounds it.
It's
more.
A lot smoother, and it's a lot less clunky, and it's a lot more terrifying. I think that the stuff they add, when they re-add that stuff to the movie, and you watch it, you realize why they cut it out.
Even the parts in, I think, was it the kitchen and some of the other areas where they have the images in the background, it wasn't as apparent in the original cut.
Yeah.
With the new cut, you saw a lot more things in the background, and it threw things off a little bit. But if you are not totally taken out of it, it's still very, unnerving. Even that spider walk scene, although I think people laughed, it was still unnerving to me to have the scene the way it was cut. The way it was filmed overall was scary, but I could seeing horror movies by now for so many hundreds of horror movies I've seen, you could probably laugh at it just a little bit. But still, there's the aspect of it just being grounded in a sense, and I think that's why for the majority, besides even all those critiques, that's why it holds weight now. I mean, the whole thing is like an emotional roller coaster.
Oh yeah, for sure.
You don't just get scary music when it's scary. It's sometimes quiet. Like the whole Exorcist scene. It's a very quiet scene. You're hearing the bed rocking. You're hearing the throw of the almost the torture Linda Blair was going through when she's on that bed. Like, it's real. Like that, and I think that's why.
Let's sorry, go ahead, Steve. Then we'll jump to Alex.
I want to point out too something that I mentioned earlier to you, Gareth. We had an author on years ago on the show there, Thomas B. Allen, and he's notorious for writing the book Possession. Okay, or Possessed, sorry. And basically it is the true story of what The Exorcist was based upon.
Oh, the boy.
Blatty, about the boy. And it was based upon the diaries of the Jesuits who were in charge
That's
of
right.
The Exorcist.
They made a movie of this with Timothy Dalton.
They did.
Wow.
Yeah, they made a movie based on the story that inspired The Exorcist.
So the real Exorcist?
Yeah.
The real Exorcist?
Yeah, the real. Yeah, yeah.
That's kind of
exactly,
funny.
Yeah. So anyways,
right.
what is cool about this is the fact that Allen bases his book upon the Jesuit diaries, the bishops and the fathers who were a part of a team that were tending to this teenage boy who had been what they believed to be possessed. And Blatty, his book, The Exorcist, obviously is loosely based upon the article, and then later on the possessed. Right?
Right.
There was some sort of I don't know discrepancy there as to who actually brought forth the actual case or whatever else, but whatever, that's a whole entirely different ball game. But what I found fascinating about Tom, I don't know, Alex, if you remember that the interview at all.
So
I do remember. I ended up buying the book too.
Wait a second. So Steve, you and Alex actually interviewed the guy who wrote the book based on the original story that became The Exorcist, the original newspaper story about the child that was possessed.
Yes,
Thomas B. Allen.
So, Alex, what was your take on this?
It was interesting. I mean, I had never even heard of this guy until Steve brought him on the show. And I subsequently ended up buying the book and reading it. And, it's more done. I mean, all the stuff you see on The Exorcist, all of the, the vomiting, the head spinning and what have you is obviously added for effect. Mm-hmm. But it was more of a chronicle of the boy and what he was going through and how it all. And if I'm not mistaken, Steve, because I read this book again a couple of years ago, but it all started, ironically enough, with the Ouija board. If I'm not mistaken, you're where right. I think it was an aunt or an uncle that was a spiritualist or something to that effect that brought over a Ouija board and started playing with the boy, and then all hell broke loose after they started playing, sort of deal, right? And that's how that story sort of evolved.
And the boy's name obviously was Roland Dole, and the case broke the news in 1949. But basically, Thomas B. Allen based the primary notes upon Father Walter H. Halloran, and his deal, because he was basically one of the last surviving, I believe, witnesses of this exorcism of Roland.
Now they kept his name secret for many years, right? They didn't release the name of the boy until the boy was like in his 50s or something, right?
Something, and I'm trying to remember. Robbie, what was it? Robbie Manhelm or something like that was the pseudonym, I believe. Mm-hmm. At least that's the pseudonym that Allen gave him. Now, I don't know across the board, but from what I can remember, I believe it was something like Robbie Manheim or something like that was the pseudonym that they gave Roland.
Okay. I'm sorry. I thought you were going. I thought there was.
No.
I thought there was more coming then, so I was waiting. But no. Okay. So let's talk.
Well,
okay. Go ahead.
No, I mean they also changed the location, I believe. I think the location was, instead of Boston, it was Maryland or something like that.
Right.
So I mean they switched it all up because they wanted to mislead everyone, obviously, but.
Well, the premise of The Exorcist and I guess the original story was, a young child gets sick and starts exhibiting some very strange behavior, and as a parent, what you're going to do is you're going to go through all the traditional forms of remedy, right? You're going to go to doctors and psychiatrists and all of those above until you get to the point where you're only. When you go through all the standard practices and you come to the end where your only other avenue of recourse to try and help your child is maybe a spiritual aspect, and depending on your own religion, whatever faith you're drawn to or were raised in, you're going to go down that road. And I know that the Catholics have a very strong tradition in exorcism and casting out demons. So in the movie, that's what they do. And what's incredible about the movie is, and they could have gone any other way. They could have gone to a point where they might have gone through all this strange phenomenon, all this weird stuff, but ultimately rounded it out and said, well, she was mentally ill. Yeah. And that would have been the end of that. But they didn't. They went down the avenue that said, No, there was a supernatural, paranormal, unexplained entity / phenomena that was infesting the house and the young girl, and the only way to remedy that, or at least to give the appearance of remedy, was to engage a religious practice. Now, if
sorry,
No, go ahead.
Gareth, and another point you have to put in there too with that is the fact that look when this came out.
Mhm.
What was it, 1974?
Yeah.
And 1974, in the early to mid 70s, you had a reoccurrence of
Satanic Panic.
satanic panic.
Well,
Yeah.
Demon possession and everything else that played into all this. So this is another reason why not only the movie came out but became so popular.
well, sorry, I'm sorry. Let me just finish this thought, then I'll jump.
No problem. Go ahead.
Then I'll jump over to Justin. I see him smiling there. Look at that. Look at that smile. Look at that. Yeah, look at that smile. The late 60s to the mid 70s was a very strange time in Western culture. Throughout Western Europe and the United States, it was a time where witchcraft, Satanism, the paranormal weren't necessarily frowned upon. It was very much a part of the culture. If you look at the literature of the time, look at the movies that came out from say maybe 1965 to 1975, and you look at that segment of time, and you look at all the horror movies or psychological dramas that came out during that time, they were all very, very much in tune and or in line with the darkness. There was a lot of dark. There's so many movies. Rosemary's Baby, right? I can think of a million movies that came out around that time, which very much played into this new kind of. Well, let me put it this way to you: if you were around in 1975 and you went to a supermarket and you were there buying your loaf of bread and your gallon of milk and your bag of chips or whatever, when you went into the checkout, and you have those magazine racks with all housekeeping and blah 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 and all these things, you'd have magazines on those racks like Witchcraft Today, Satanism, ghosts,
Bigfoot's alive.
But it was part of the culture back then, right?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Justin. I'm
It
sorry.
Isn't that when the Church of Satan was formed too?
No,
Back in the late 70s.
No, I think the Church of Satan.
About the 70s.
I think it came around sooner than that, right? It was the Church of Satan was in the mid to late 60s with
I thought it was
Anton
even
LaVey.
earlier than that.
No, Anton LaVey wasn't that old.
We can resolve this real easy because, believe it or not, we're sitting in front of keyboards that connect to this thing called the internet, and
Really?
and we
I didn't know
and we
that.
can type.
I think Justin's.
1966.
There you go.
We can type words and phrases, and
Justin beat us already.
so there you go. So it was the mid to late 60s when the Church of Satan was.
Yes.
Come on, Alex, you should know that. You're an annual member.
Chopping up them baby heads and everything.
Yeah, you should know that.
But it didn't
Come on.
become popular until later. It didn't become popular right away.
Okay,
Yeah,
all right,
yeah,
okay.
it took a
I'll grant you that. But Justin, you were chomping at the bit to chime in when I was rambling about the Exorcist. So what did you have to say?
Well, I wanted to add to the whole media hysteria to all that because we had so many shows coming out during that time that were based about looking for paranormal experiences, and one of the biggest, I think, individuals which ran to the end right now are the Warrens. They've been around since they think the early 60s or 50s even, wasn't it? Yeah.
Well, the Warren, they were very much believers and or pushers. They were pushing out the idea of a demonic reality, right?
Yes. Yes. When did what was it? Amityville Horror come out? Wasn't that
79?
That was later.
That was 79.
79.
Yeah, it was later
79 was
70s for
Amityville
sure.
Horror,
But
yeah.
although they were involved in that, and the movie came out early, that all that happened in that decade of, if I remember correctly. So,
absolutely.
a lot of these things were influenced during that time. And I remember seeing just media about the Satanic Panic, and remember seeing them on talk shows. And, literally they were a huge influence on everything that was going on with the whole possession field. I think they were almost the Zach Baggins.
Exactly, I agree with you.
Okay, why you got to go there, Justin?
It's true though.
Why you got to bag on my hero? Come on, stop.
I have to agree with Justin though. I mean, that's ahead, exactly Steve. True. I mean, they were cashing in on all this phenomena that was going on. When you look at the Amityville Horror, what I really like, sure, the case it really intrigued me, but what really intrigued me most about that was the DeFeo.
Oh yeah, for sure.
It wasn't the family that moved in there afterwards and claiming that they had all this crap going on, which I don't believe at all. But the actual DeFeo case, wait. The family that's
why don't you believe it? I'm interested. What?
I don't believe it for a second. I think it's all crap.
Why?
I think it's hoax. I don't believe it it was one of the look at. I'm not a big Warren fan. I'll tell you that right now. I don't like the Warrens at all. I don't believe, because they were religiously charged in the way they approach cases. And I don't agree with their approach at all. I'm sorry. And I know I'll probably take a little flack on that, but oh well, that's just the way it goes.
No.
And made a decent living on it too.
They made a huge living off
a few decades.
Yeah.
No, you won't get any flack, Steve. On this show, 100%, you will not get any flack whatsoever goofing on the Warrens, because from my perspective, they are very goofable. They're very easy to be made fun of, right?
They're wholesome.
Very easy to poke fun at them. I am not a believer in the Warrens. In other words, their particular take. Like I agree with Steve. I'm not into their view on reality. How they perceive reality is very foreign to me. But by the same token, I do find them tremendously entertaining. And I do enjoy watching them, but not because I subscribe to their worldview. I find them entertaining because it's like it's fun. It's fun to watch them.
Yeah.
That's the only thing. What do you think, Alex? I see you moving into the microphone there, getting ready to speak. Go ahead. Okay. All right. So
your mic's on mute.
Are you on mute? You're on mute.
I can see the light flashing.
There we go.
There we go. I was going to say we missed a couple of movies, Omen being one of them.
Oh, yeah.
Omen. Yeah.
And the more recent movie would be The Exorcism of Emily Rose.
This is for you, Damien. Sorry, I had to say that.
Damien!
This is for...
Come on, what about all...
This is for you, Damien!
Italian ripoff, Alex. Come on, there are so many Italian ripoffs of The Exorcist,
too. Lots, yeah.
I don't watch Italian movies.
What?
Nobody asked you that. You didn't have to.
Come on. Alex brings up a good point though. The Omen, the Omen was more influential on me than The Exorcist was, because I saw the Omen before I saw The Exorcist, and the first Omen 1, the original with Gregory Peck, that was phenomenal.
That's the best one.
Oh man, it was so great.
The remake is garbage.
I have not seen the remake, and I'm not even eager to see the remake. But the first Omen was it was such because when I first saw it, I was a little kid. I was a little kid when I first saw the Omen, and what messed with me was the whole idea was that there was Jesus Christ, but there was an antichrist. There was an opposite to Jesus. There was the son of the devil. Just as God gave us Jesus to come to the earth, the devil would do the same thing and send us the Antichrist. And to my young my young demented mind, this was a wonderful concept. This was something that this blew my mind, and I ate this up. I loved The Omen, with the little 666 on his head, and it was wonderful. I loved that movie, and the knives and the it was so great. It was amazing. A lot.
Have you grabbed the box set yet? The Blu-ray box set?
Why you got to tempt me with these things, Steve?
It's a straight question. You better get it
he's
now.
He's planting seeds. But see, the thing, don't get me wrong. I do want to get the box set of The Omen on Blu-ray, but I only really want the first movie, because all the others go from absolute crap to why am I wasting my life on this, whereas the first one is just superb.
I did like the third one though.
With Damien?
I did like the third one.
The final conflict.
I did like the third one.
Sam Neill.
Yeah, Sam Neill.
Yeah, he went on. Did you know that Damien created Jurassic Park?
Yeah.
Yeah. He was also in The Mouth of Madness.
That's right. Yeah, The Mouth of Madness. Yeah, the John Carpenter movie.
Heretic was part 2.
Yeah, The Heretic. Let's talk a little bit about The Heretic, the Exorcist Part 2.
Don't even go there.
No, we should. We should talk about it, because it's not all okay. It's mostly bad, but it's not it's not all bad. I don't know if you remember, but there's certain scenes in that movie, that the scenes with young Max von Sydow when he's in Africa and he encounters what?
The only good part of it. Max von Sydow.
It's awesome. Well, the scenes where young Max von Sydow encounters the African child who's possessed, those scenes are superb. Mm. They really, really are compelling scenes. But the rest of it, when it's in modern day with Reagan growing up, are very, 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 very silly. But let's get back on track. And we've talked about how demons and the paranormal, or the belief in, has kind of affected pop culture over the past 40, 45 years, maybe say 50 years. But is there any truth to this? Is there any method to this madness? Is there a root of truth that grows up into what we see in popular culture? Is there anything to this, or is it all just make-believe?
Very rare. Extremely rare.
Tell me more, Steve.
Yeah.
Extremely rare. What you see in the movies like The Omen and The Exorcist, and if you want to go into movies like The Entity, even.
Oh,
yeah.
There's another classic based on
true story.
Barry Taft, Dr. Barry Taft's
wait,
research.
I'll let you continue, but remind me. I have an Entity story. Go ahead.
Okay, but after talking to several different bishops and whatnot, and who deal with demon possession and exorcisms, and investigating the paranormal, it is an extreme rarity that something like that, like true possession, unfolds. Mm-hmm. That even happens. We're talking about not even 1%.
Yeah.
Less than 1%.
Yeah.
And you could talk to almost any bishop or whatever priest who deals with this type of phenomena. That 99.5% of whatever they deal with is explainable,
probably
and it's not true possession. Exactly, less than that. That is considered true possession.
But even though it's considered true, because we want to get to the point where we're discussing, is this a part of reality, or is it all just make believe and misdiagnosis with mental illness, or is there really something going on here? When you think about it, if there's an external intelligence, an entity, a spiritual entity that is external to us, that has the ability to infest our mortal body and to control us and to take over time, is that a rational possibility? Does it happen? Right? And I know you're saying, Steve, and I agree with you. I'm not disagreeing with you. I agree with you. But you're saying that a tiny, 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 tiny percentage of these cases are actually real. Most of them are, schizophrenia, mental illness, yada, yada, yada. But here's a great here's a great anecdote. If you think of a swan, swans are white, correct?
Yeah.
How many swans does it take to prove? How many black swans does it take to prove that not all swans are white?
One black swan.
Exactly. Exactly. Right? It only takes one black swan to prove that not all swans are white.
But
wait. Do you see the point I'm making here?
No, I get the point you're making, right. But I mean, base that on a case that claims to have been a true demonic possession, and show me the proof that it is.
Yeah,
there is nothing out there in literature that convinces me that there's ever been a true possession, something that somebody was possessed by this demonic entity, if you will, that would prove to me wrong. When there's so much medically and scientifically explaining away a lot of these possessions, if not most of them, if not all of them, I like to, Gareth, I like to believe that that's a possibility, but I just don't. I have not seen or read or experienced anything that brings me down that road.
No, I feel exactly the same way, Steve. And in some ways, maybe I'm being a little bit of a devil's advocate because I do agree with what you're saying, right? But but having said that, even though I do agree with you, it would be kind of cool, huh?
Yeah. Well, yeah, obviously. Show me the demon. I want to see a demon. Yeah. Damn right I want to see.
Here's the difference, though. The difference is that producing a black swan is a lot easier than producing proof of demonic possession.
True.
So unless you're there at an exorcism where you witness all of the phenomenon that may or may not occur, you're basically going based on what people record on paper and assuming that it's either true or not, depending on your belief. So that's where the sticking point is. So, and I'm not disagreeing either with the sentiment that possession is very rare. It is very rare, because if it wasn't, then we'd all be screwed. But unless you're there, you can't really say. It's one of those scenarios where it's like he said, she said. It's almost like with paranormal investigations. I could go out to an investigation and capture whatever I capture, but then whoever reads what I write or whoever listens to what I put out there can still say, well, it was manufactured, it was doctored.
Sure.
Yeah. So it's my word against theirs, and it's a question of whether they choose to believe me or not.
So let's talk about some cases then. Let's talk about some of the cases that have bubbled up over the years that kind of, while it's not definitive proof of demonic infestation and possession, leans into that direction. It points into that area, but it's not 100% by any stretch of the imagination.
No. So I got one off the bat.
All right, let's go.
I mentioned this earlier. The movie I mentioned earlier, The Exorcism of Emily Rose, is one perfect example. Now, obviously, that movie is based on a woman that lived in the United States when the story was actually based. I think it was a German girl.
German.
And I forgot.
Right. Annalise Michael.
That's it. Annalise. Yeah. And her case. In her case, it was dubbed as obviously a possession, and the priest ended up actually going to jail for that, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
In reality, and she did die. Yes, as she did in the movie as well. The difference is that in the movie, the priest kind of got off, not necessarily scot-free, but he got off with time served, And then he basically got scot-free, where in reality the priest actually went to jail. And then that's in part and parcel as to why also the church nowadays really is hesitant to perform exorcisms, because of scenarios like that, where they exhaust all other avenues, such as mental illness or the possibility of a mental illness, and they'll always direct the family to go that route first.
Mm-hmm.
And when all avenues are exhausted, then and only then will they even attempt to perform an exorcism on the individual.
Yes.
But how often does that work, though? I mean, and that's just if there is a scenario like that, and the parents have exhausted, all their money and their time on all these possible solutions, doctors, psychiatrists, and they still are going nowhere, and they bring in a priest or a rabbi or whatever faith they're subscribing to. How often does that actually work? When they go they go through the ritual, and suddenly the kid or the person or whoever is like, yeah, I'm fine now, it's cool, I'm all good.
Even if it does, it could be a sugar pill. I mean, we know what the power of suggestion is to it. I think that's the bigger one. Even in that case of Annalise Michael, it was, as far as I understood, it was at least noted that she had problems since she was young. So the stuff that happened with the specific parts of the exorcism were probably a byproduct of whatever was already happening to her previously. Of course, you could say she was already possessed since she was in grade school, but from what I've read, I mean, she was sleepwalking, she would pass out, all sorts of different things that were happening to her that were, at least scientifically, we can somewhat explain. Even in most of these cases that we find some grounding to, we can scientifically explain almost all of it. Even the signs of sores showing on your body. And a lot of people don't know that a lot of these issues that do come up in those, people are already traumatized for whatever reason. Something already happened to them, that led them to that point. And it's even suggested, I believe they even have it as a working thesis of possession syndrome. If we look that up, that might be a real thing. But even though it's maybe a small percentage that those cases are so extreme to an extent that we can't totally explain it, we already have enough cases to base some sort of idea of what could be happening in those. It's funny because we have enough to even say there's a possession syndrome. There's enough in science for us to say that. There's enough in science to say that there's even what you call the foreign language syndrome, where people who suffer head trauma start speaking languages they never knew or never spoke before. So when we look at these things, overall, it is hard to decipher what's really going on, because we can't explain it.
Isn't it?
As well as the human body is strange as it is, the mind is strange as it is. Go ahead, Gary.
But isn't it, Justin, or everyone on the show? Isn't it, though, when you have a person, child, man, woman, adult, whatever, who is exhibiting aspects of possible possession, the thing that tips it from being, mental illness, split personality, psychosis, whatever, the thing that tips it over into the possession is paranormal phenomena that's happening around the person, things that cannot be readily explained.
Go ahead, Steve.
I mean, first of all, if you want to continue on with the Annalise Michael story.
Yeah.
Okay. Number one, look at when this happened. I believe it was in the mid-70s, 76, roughly, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
And Justin pointed out, and it's very true, she was known to have issues with epilepsy.
Yes.
She had great bouts of depression, hallucinations, auditory hallucinations, I believe, was one of the major things, visual. And she had a mental illness to begin with going into this. Now, what really irks me about this case is the fact that she passed away and her cause of death was declared as, I believe it was emaciation, malnutrition,
Yeah.
and starvation.
Yeah.
These priests starved her to death, believing that she was possessed by a demon.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what right do these priests have to allow this to happen? I know they were charged with whatever they were charged with, but I mean, this is the type of stuff when you have to separate religious aspects with science. And I mean, you got to look now. Things have advanced greatly in 40 years, 50 years now. On the human condition, when it comes to mental illness, bipolarism and split personality and all this other stuff that plays in, and this is a major thing when you go and investigate a claim such as this, as somebody believes that they're being possessed by a demonic entity or whatnot. Then you have to back your ass up, because if you don't, you're going to be in a world of hell.
Yeah.
Really.
If you don't be. Oh, I'm sorry. Finish your thoughts, Steve. Go ahead.
If you don't do your homework on this particular person's background, including their medical and drug, alcohol, whatever, let me tell you, man, you're going to be in a world of hell if you don't do that. And this is what I've come across, a personal experience with demonic possession cases. 99.99 whatever percent, if not 100, are very explainable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
but
always some trauma.
It has to be in combination with paranormal experience, though, right? There has to be some kind of paranormal aspect to the case. I mean, if you just have some chick or some guy going and acting all stupid, I mean, what does that mean? That's nothing. There's got to be some stuff going on that's external to them that's not explainable.
I think part of that reasoning, I should say, comes from our past experiences, our past research, our past media, such as The Exorcist and so on. Because realistically, even in the Annalise case, there's no physical evidence of anything. What they based it off of were the physical lesions, as well as the change in her voice and some other physical characteristics. That was really it. It wasn't that drawers were flying or anything like that at all. And almost every case that I've read about such things as these that are taken seriously, it's not that. It's usually something auditory. They're speaking a different language. And during that time, let's just say most of these cases that we're even basing that understanding off of, that's like over 40 years old now, you know. If we're even basing it off just the fact that someone can speak differently, we have enough things in the past decade in media back, and not to be redundant, but we have foreign language syndrome where people who suffer head trauma tend to speak those. So there's the total understandings, and it's a possibility that there are no, and I'm going to say that it's not even, but there are no physical cases to prove paranormal experiences.
Well, let me ask you this, Justin. Even with foreign language syndrome, you know, somebody, they're walking along, they bump their head, they get knocked out, they wake up, and suddenly they're speaking Chinese.
Yeah.
How is that even possible, dude?
I was actually going to say that too. Yeah.
That
in itself is kind of paranormal.
Exactly. How is that even possible? That out of the blue you're going to be speaking a language that you have no clue about. How is that even possible?
Believe it or not, the majority of us probably heard almost every language that we run into on a daily basis. And I could only assume there is a possibility subconsciously that we just kind of put in our memory banks, and somehow we start putting it all together in a sense. It just goes in the back.
Reiterate something, but to be able to have a conversation, an actual conversation with someone in a foreign language, it's still like I could listen to someone else speaking a different language. Doesn't mean I'll understand them, but then if I get bumped in the head and I can have an actual conversation with that individual in that language, that in itself is it's pretty out there.
I agree.
So the brain retains it no matter what. Your brain records what's going on. It doesn't mean that you don't understand it, but the thing is the brain retains it.
Of course it does. But to be able to have an actual conversation with someone just based on retention is far out there.
But at the same time, you have to prove it to me that this went down. I mean, again, there is no documentation other than hearsay that this person was speaking Latin and they didn't even know it.
No,
it's very small that it is that case. Even in Annalise's case, she didn't speak Latin. It was the growling and the change in her voice that was.
No, but I'm going based on what Justin's saying with foreign language. I'm not talking about possession cases right now, but Latin is one language that's not commonly heard out there.
Correct.
In media
unless
or
you're
otherwise.
Catholic.
Yes.
Unless you're Catholic.
But even if you're Catholic,
even if you're
in the
Catholic,
circle,
you're not going to be.
Even if you're in the circle, you're not going to know Latin.
Yeah.
Latin is a dead language.
No,
you have to study it.
I've heard of cases of people, like Americans who get, who are bumped on the head or they fall or whatever, and
they speak Chinese.
And then they wake up and suddenly they're talking. Hello, how are you? All right. They have they have an English accent,
Yes.
Or they're speaking with a different accent. Now that as weird and as strange as that is, I kind of get it. But speaking a different language, that's a whole different deal.
Savants.
That's a whole deal. Yeah. I agree with Alex on this one. That's to be able to speak out of the blue, to be able to speak a foreign language completely fluently out of the. That's something.
Well, you got to go through trauma.
Very strange.
But that's the thing. That's the thing. Show me the documentation that they were speaking fluent Latin or whatever else. They're not. There hasn't been any. There's been claims though of it.
Yes, and even in a sense, trauma in these cases has already happened. Even if someone was being considered to have an exorcism, you have to already assume it's already been a traumatic experience so far. So even to get to that point, it's not something necessarily out of the blue. Even in the case of speaking in those, you have to have trauma in order to trigger it. But I would assume if it is the case, it's a possibility that it's something that is subconsciously retained, or because we receive frequencies, maybe getting knocked in the head changes the channel.
Well, and that's I think where Gareth and I were getting at.
Yeah.
This foreign language syndrome is that.
But it wouldn't be paranormal. It would be the fact that subconsciously, the collective unconscious. Well, I mean, the existence
it would be
of life is
paranormal because we don't understand it.
Yeah.
We don't understand the concept.
But yes,
right?
In a sense, the only way to explain it would be somehow we are picking up information for what we got knocked in the head. It just channeled that frequency to say, okay, we're picking up Chinese now, which I've seen videos that has happened, So they're that, or they retained it so far deep in their subconscious that when it gets knocked in there, when they have some frontal lobe damage, it just knocks it up, and here we are. So I mean, it's a total possibility. It's not totally paranormal, but it is because it's uncommon. And I'm sure if we do run into it more, there would be a better explanation. But Steve is right. No matter what, we have even in the cases of Latin, it was never a full-on conversation from what I understand. And even if there was, we were never there. And to even point that even further, we've all seen Demon House. And there's many claims made.
Oh, no.
In Demon House. There's claims
your
of
bone
kids
here,
walking
dude.
the walls. There's claims of kids walking the wall by social workers. All right. I don't believe that one bit. What I believe is that they saw something happen in that split second, and because of the overly traumatic experience, that's how they perceive maybe this kid. Maybe he jumped because he was so erratic, and I've walked on walls for a split second. It's not that hard to accomplish a few feet.
You've walked on walls?
Yes. Yes,
He's
I
possessed.
You
I
have
channeled
walked
my
on a
inner
wall.
Belial. I channeled my inner Pazul, and
Yeah.
I was able to walk it on. No, if you get enough momentum and an erratic state, and you push your energy forward, you can quickly up the wall within a few seconds, gain a few feet. It's totally possible. And based off what they showed in that particular documentary, he was surrounded by a bunch of people, and I believe someone was holding him because they were trying to, I think, restrain him. And so, while they were holding him, he was walking on the wall. So even though it's possible, all of us who've been involved in this already questioned that one documentary by who we will not say. We already know the name.
Yeah.
But if that is the case in that aspect of current media, now imagine most of these claims, because we don't even have modern possession claims, and the ones that we do,
Well, maybe,
I looked up, and we have a collection from psychiatrists and psychologists
Yeah.
who've been doing studies. They actually done studies in a town in China, I believe, where at least 20 people they collected were supposedly possessed. So 20 people is a lot of people in a small area to be possessed. So something else has to be going on. If we didn't have science,
Was
that's
that Fukushima?
no, I'll have to look it up again.
Well,
Let me be the devil's
all
advocate
right, let's
here,
go ahead.
Gareth.
Go ahead.
Get out of here, Alex. With your devil's advocate.
No, let me be the devil's advocate tonight. I feel like being a devil's advocate.
Devil's
So,
advocate.
what makes us believe that the church actually publishes any cases of possession?
I don't think they do necessarily. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Wait a sec. I believe they do.
I don't know, man.
And
I think they would want to keep it on the down low, dude. This is not a cool thing to be publicizing.
Well, no, they publicly condone possession, and in fact, I remember just God, what was it? 5 years ago, I believe, they were putting it out there that they were looking for priests that wanted to belong to a special sect of
Yes.
becoming exorcists.
They don't deny.
They don't
possession,
deny it, and
but they don't publish the cases.
they have published well-known cases.
Which ones?
They, for instance, the Annalise Michael.
But that wasn't the church.
That was the church.
No, I don't think it was the church who published that.
The vibe I get is that the church is not big on publishing anything. If you know,
No.
if you know what I mean.
Yes, I do.
They want to keep a lot of stuff on the down low. So I don't know if they'd even
Because
want to
they know it's
publish
crap.
any stuff like that. But that's an interesting idea, though. Let's talk about that for a little bit. So let's just play devil's advocate. Let's just say that
All right.
that the demons are real, and every once in a while, you know, in their little nether regions, wherever they be, floating around in their dimension or whatever, they get bored and they can possess humans, right? You know, maybe there's nothing.
They come up for air.
Maybe there's nothing on TV in Demon Land, right? So they want to do some stuff. So they go.
I hate Lucy. The last episode, I hate Lucy.
I hate Lucy, exactly.
It sounds like an episode of Supernatural.
So they get bored. There's nothing to do. They want to get up to some shenanigans, whatever. And they go and they possess some humans. They think, oh well, you know, it will be fun. It'll be fun to be a human for a couple of days, weeks, months, whatever. So let me find some unsuspecting human, infest their corporeal body, take it over, and let's have some fun. You know, let's make our existence less boring than it is. So let's just say that happens, right? And you know, the priests get involved and they show up, and there's a person, man, woman, child, whatever, a person, a human being, and they're in the room, whether they're on a bed, in a chair, whatever, and the priests show up and they start reading from a book and start yelling and commanding and sprinkling holy water. And if you're a demon, why do you have to go along with this? Why do you have to listen to them? Why do you have to obey them? Why do you have to do whatever they say? You know, say, I cast you out. I can. The power of Christ compels you. I can. And if you're a demon, why don't you just say, you know what, dude, get out of here. You're.
I got this.
Why I don't want to do nothing. I don't want to listen to you. I'll do what I want. Who are you to tell me what to do? Get out of here. How about I leave this bitch and possess you? How'd you like that? I mean, do you know what I mean? It's like, why are they listening?
They do that in Repossessed with what's his face from the Naked Gun. Great movie.
Yeah, okay. But seriously though, why do they go along with this theater, this play, this acting thing? Why do they play the part? Why don't they just tell the priest to go F himself and I'm going to do whatever I want to do? Why?
I think there's some hierarchy. If we are to say it, there's obviously some hierarchy, some laws that they exist in that we don't understand, obviously, and that would be the only explanation. And if we are to take it serious, and if they do exist elsewhere, elsewhere is also material. Even if this is not here, it's material somewhere else. So I would assume that they would be, like you said, sitting somewhere doing whatever they're doing until they get their call number up, because that would be it. That would be all it is literally taking this.
Paging Demon 13. Demon 13, your possession has arrived. Demon 13. Oh shit! Oh wait! Look, hang on. I gotta go. I gotta possess this. I'll be right back. I mean, how?
Yeah, we get back to the game later.
Right.
It would have to be that, and they would have to have some sort of grounds and rules that they abide by if that's the case. We exist by laws, so we'd only assume that they do, especially if it is that easy to have a prayer, cast you out. And if it does, then that means those particular things have weight and power than that we should be using more so if that's the case. But it would have to be they exist in their own laws, their own models, their own structures, and we would have to believe that because again, why else would they do it? There's got to be some gain for them other than just boop blop and okay, back to the same old thing again.
Because you got to think of these demons. They can possess people or infest areas, but when some guy in a costume shows up reading from a book, you got to listen to him.
Because the power of God
doesn't make a lot of sense to me. What do you?
No, or it could be the individual, right? So the power of the mind, whether you allow something to come in or cast it out yourself. Mm-hmm. If you're a true believer, and even if you're not a true believer, but you grew up in the area of religion, whichever religion it may be, because exorcism don't only exist in the Christian faith.
No, exactly.
Correct.
Absolutely.
But it's one of those things where if I'm the one who's possessed and a priest comes to my house, first of all, they would burn as soon as they enter the house. But that's a different story. If they come to my house and they perform an exorcism, if subconsciously I believe it enough, I'm the one who's physically driving out the demon because it is my body.
Mm-hmm.
Not the other way around. It's not the demon wanting to leave, because I'm pretty sure they don't want to leave. But it's me who's taking those words that the priest is saying by faith, so to speak,
right,
and casting the demon out.
That's a really good point, Alex. I never quite considered it that way. That makes a lot of sense. Whereas you're in control and you're hearing the priest's words, but it's not the demon who's paying attention to the priest's words. It's you. You are the one that's kicking the demon out of your body. That's a good point. I never quite considered it that way before. That makes sense as much as this whole scenario
as anything else
makes sense. It really does. What do you think, Steve?
It's all hogwash.
Hogwash, I tell you, hogwash.
That's usually my stance.
Hogwash.
Yep. Biting his lip the whole time.
This week on Happy Days, this week on Happy Days, the role of Alex will be played by Steve.
I've always had trouble with the structure, period, because there is nothing that has convinced me otherwise. That even talking about this, The fact that somebody believes that demons exist, and in the way that people are taught, the structure to be, if you will, through religion or whatnot. It just baffles my mind. It really does. I can't understand something that I have never experienced, and to sit here and say, look it, the reality of it is, yeah, they exist, but how can I tell you they exist if I've never experienced it?
Yeah.
How can I tell you that a person is truly infested or possessed by, quote unquote, a demonic entity if I've never physically or mentally or whatever experienced what a demon is?
Yeah.
If it even does exist.
Mm-hmm.
So you set that aside and you go headfirst into these sort of stories and cases and whatnot, trying to explain as best as possible the fact that, look it, people like to believe that there's this non-human structure that exists within us or around us or
external.
whatever.
It's external to us.
External to us. It's very hard for me to believe.
No, I get it.
As much as I want to,
sure,
but
sure. Well, we're starting to wrap up the conversation today. I mean, and the whole subject of demonology, while I love it, it's fascinating. I love the movies, I love the literature, I love all everything about it. I don't necessarily think that it's real. I'd like it to. I'd like it to be real because it certainly would add a certain spice to life.
I'll be a demon hunter or a demon slayer.
It would add a little. How you say, je ne sais quoi. but there's. I don't think that it is a part of reality. But having said that, I'm completely open to the fact that I might be wrong. And I'm willing to be, to experience or to change my mind on the subject. But I don't think it is. I think it's, I align with what Steve is saying. I think it's a bunch of nonsense. But having said that, I'd love to be wrong.
Yeah.
I'd love to be wrong in regard to it.
I read so much literature when I was younger on demons and the history of them and the many different aspects of them, when it comes to fallen angels and what I mentioned earlier, yokai and the many different incantations that these formulate. But I mean, never. As much as I want to believe that they exist, to me, if anything is truly evil in this world, it's humans.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And that's all I've ever seen.
We're the demons.
I don't know about that, guys. I think we all have the potential to do extreme good and extreme evil. We're both. Right, we're all Hitler, and we're all Jesus, right? We're all of those things. You know what I mean? We are. We're both. We both have the capacity for extreme evil and extreme goodness. So to say that all humans are evil, I think that's not true. That's not.
Well, I'm not saying all humans, but I mean when you look at the act of something evil. You look at what humans are capable of.
No, absolutely, of course, we are capable of extreme depravity. There's no question, of course. But I think that most people are good, and
you like to believe that. Yeah.
No, I think most people are good, but most people are stupid. right? No, seriously.
Yeah.
Most people are inherently good, and most people are dumber than rocks. Right?
Yeah.
Not everyone, of course. The people watching us on this stream, of course, you're highly intelligent.
Most definitely not.
Highly intelligent, evolved beings. Otherwise, why would you not be here listening to our words? Of course, you're a highly intelligent, evolved being. But all of the people that are not watching us, well, they're imbeciles. But as we wrap this up, we have a few people in the chat room. Do you have any questions or comments from this?
Oh, yeah.
This highly enlightening and wonderful conversation that's been going on here between myself, Steve, and Justin. Please don't all type at once. Let's get one person at a time, please. I see millions of comments coming through every second, so please calm down. Calm down. If we have anyone possessed, please type in tongues.
Get in now. We'll get in there at this moment. We'll bring in the Ecto 1, and we're on our way.
Type in tongues. We have a couple of people here. Let's see. We have, I guess, people that know Steve and Alex. We have Marcel Anderson. He says
she
says, "Hi, Steve." And Terry Bendel says, "This is why we have Alex and Steve." Well, we got some Alex and Steve fans in the house today, and of course Marcelli. She, see, I got it right there. Okay, hang on. She says, of course, that she agrees with Steve. There you go. And who wouldn't? Let's be honest.
Far from it.
Well, I mean, we're only speaking in reality here. I mean, as far as we've been in and everything that we've ever talked about on any of these shows, we do our best to at least have grounded information.
Sure.
And we're honestly telling you, there's no evidence of real exorcisms at all.
Yeah.
There's nothing that really confirms those things. There have been many experiences that relate to that, but we have no true scientific explanation or validity that exorcisms are real.
I mean, you have to point out too, Justin. Let's face it. I mean, science is fallible too. I mean, it's not an end-all be-all, but I mean, when we look at something such as demonic possession and demons, if you will, I mean, if you're going to have a conversation with somebody and you're going to tell them, look, I think I got a demon in my house. I mean, what's going to be the first reaction you're going to get?
Is that a red flag for you, Steve? When you go out and you do your investigations and you go into the person's house and they're like, hey, I got to tell you straight, I got a freaking demon in here. And I'm not talking about my wife. What's your is that like I'm done? You know, you can't continue there. Alex, what do you think?
It's definitely a red flag because it's one of those scenarios where, especially with the popularity of the paranormal shows today and how they play on that demon thing. You got to question everyone who comes out and is a demon expert all of a sudden and says I'm possessed by a demon or I have a demon infestation, because no one really knows what an actual demon infestation or possession actually looks like, because none of us have been there, number one. And number two, if you're basing it on what you're seeing on TV, then you're more than 100% wrong. Yeah. Even though technically you can only be 100% wrong, but you know what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where it definitely is a red flag.
Mm-hmm. No, yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I agree. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the end of this week's edition of Mindset Live. We'll be back next Monday with another equally controversial and wonderful topic that we'll delve into. I hope you can join us. I hope you tune in at 7 p.m. PST, Pacific Standard Time, or 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time next Monday, where we'll have more discussions. The more people we have, the better. So please tune in. Obviously, if you can't make it during the live broadcast, you can watch this the recorded, because it'll go live almost immediately on the Mindset Central YouTube channel, where you can watch it after the fact, which we obviously would like you to do. But that about wraps it up. I know Steve has dropped off right now, but Justin and Alex, any final words?
Go ahead, Alex.
Okay.
Go
Basically, what I'm saying is that we don't have any definitive proof of what we discussed today. That's a given. Yeah. What we discussed today was basically, hypotheticals, if anything. Is it possible? Anything's possible when you really look into it. Do we know all the facts? Of course we don't, because the powers that be probably won't disclose that information. More or less, probably to keep themselves safe more than anything else. Mm-hmm. So that's the parting words I'm leaving this with.
All right, Justin.
Yeah, I think I align with Alex there. Just be open and at least research as much as you can. That's the only thing that's gonna get us down.
I agree completely. Well, thank you all for tuning in. We really appreciate it, and hopefully you'll be back next Monday, 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 10 p.m. Eastern, where we'll have more great conversations, more discussions on some of the strangest topics you can imagine on Mindset Live. Until then, farewell, good brothers. See you, everyone. Good night.
Night.
Have a good night.